Welcome to Safety Talk. Personal safety expert Pete Canavan shares his insights and interviews experts who provide simple and effective tips, techniques, and technologies to keep you safe and secure both online and off. Here's Pete.
Hello and welcome to Safety Talk. Thanks for joining us today, and we have another great episode for our listeners and viewers. Today we are joined by Jeffery Weiss. He's the founder of the Preparedness Network, and he's a leading voice in disaster preparedness and community safety. He has over 3 decades of experience, and with the Preparedness Network, he has built a remarkable coalition of disaster services experts that are dedicated to helping people survive and thrive in different types of disaster scenarios. He's a John Maxwell certified coach, graduate of Pepperdine University, and he specializes in training organizations to develop robust employee volunteer programs, as well as create sustainable safety cultures. So it becomes a whole mindset. Now, through the Preparedness Network, he's basically revolutionizing how we think about emergency preparedness by producing educational content and providing practical training that goes beyond just maybe what people would think of in a survival situation, survival tactics. So please welcome Jeffery Weiss, who's here to share his insights on the Preparedness Network. Welcome,
Thank
Jeffery.
you. And don't forget, I also graduated from MIT as well in global sustainability in masters.
All righty then. A little bit more education for us. Well, good, right? The more the better, and more information that you've been able to acquire and then now share through the Preparedness Network. For our listeners, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and check us out on social media. We appreciate you spreading the word. So really appreciate you joining us today. When it comes to safety and emergency preparedness, unfortunately, I would say most people are woefully ill-prepared or not prepared at all. Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, most definitely. We've especially with all the fires that went on over here in Los Angeles, we saw how people were totally unprepared and totally unaware of their responsibilities to their families and their communities and themselves. And then right now, back in the East Coast, with the storms that are happening and people not, storms happen every year, but now it's worse than it's ever been. And people are unprepared, and it's costing lives.
Yeah, and with just a little bit of preparedness, so much could be saved, right? I mean, we've heard the term, like bug out bag and stuff like that, but it's not just like a something that is, oh my God, you got to survive 3 days in the wilderness. No, it should include things like, your essential papers, right? Insurance papers, wills, passports, important documents, things that you can grab at a moment's notice if you've got to leave your home, like in the case of a wildfire or a flood or some other disaster, right? So not being prepared, now you've got a major problem on your hands, and additional complications that could have been avoided had you just been just a little bit prepared, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
sort of
well,
the
I
thing
mean,
that is so upsetting.
yeah, I mean, imagine this. Imagine you're sitting at home, and all of a sudden there's a knock on your door, and you open the door, and there's a fireman and a policeman at your door, and say, "We're here. You have 15 minutes to pack up whatever you want to take and get out, and we're escorting you away." And that 15 minutes, whatever you take away, is all you'll ever have of what's in your house. Now, what do you grab? Obviously, if you grab your family, but you can grab clothes. What are you going to grab? Your documents. You're going to grab your computer. You're going to grab food. You're going to grab, and little things. It's also little things like games. If you have kids and you grab their clothing, but you don't grab something to keep their mind occupied, and can't even a deck of cards, whatever. Grab things, and then they say, "Oh, I'm going to take food," and they grab and they put a bag of milk, and they put some celery, and they put maybe some ham and chicken. Well, that stuff goes bad really fast. Oh, I don't have any granola bars in the house. Oh, what do I do? You got to grab things that A, will last, and B, people want to eat. You're going to grab all these foods, and your kids aren't going to eat it.
Right. What good is that?
Grab, as little things like that. So you have to have a bag that you can take and you have to update it, And in that bag, like you said, have clothing and have different layers of clothing because you don't know you're going to go out there. It's going to be the cold or hot. You could be in hot weather and all you have is big sweaters, or
Exactly.
you can be in cold weather and all you have is shorts and t-shirts. You got to
Very,
have
very,
layers of clothing.
no, very good point. And I think a lot of people they don't, they make that bag and they think that's good and they grab it whenever they need it and hopefully that's all it is. But no, you've got to make, because like with kids, for example, right? The bag you put together for them 2 years ago isn't going to work today. They probably have gotten a lot
Absolutely.
taller, right? So
They've gotten taller. They got their things have changed. Absolutely. You know, have batteries so you can charge a big battery pack so you can charge your devices, because you don't know when the next time you're going to run against power because the place you're going to be in could have no power,
so one of the
So,
things that we had that was in your bio. I didn't mention it because there was a lot there. Um, was that you have a background in setting up television stations, and so what did that was that part of what helped inspire you to establish a preparedness network? And that's number one. And then number two, when was it established?
well, so I've been a broadcast engineer for over 30 years. I've had a company that has built video production, post production systems for the last 25 years. We started right after 9/11. And I saw we've set up a lot of stations. We set up the disaster recovery station for PBS, where if PBS in New York goes down, they can immediately in less than a minute be up and running in their secret facility in the middle of the United States that will pop up. But you have to have disaster. If you're a business, any kind of business, you need to make sure that all your documents are backed up. And they're not only backed up, you need to back it up into three places, whether you're a home or business. You need to make sure everything you have has a 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 versus one is none, two is some, and three is done. That means if you have one backup of all your data, you have none because that one backup could go away. If you have two places where it's backed up and at your home and in the cloud, that's some. But if you have it in three places, the home, the cloud, and your grandma's house in New York or across the United States, that's done. Then you're done. You have three because the chances of all those three going down are very unlikely.
Right. Now you mentioned
And
something that I've heard a lot, which is, but I haven't added the three to it. But, one of the first rules of disaster preparedness is two is one and one is none, right? Because if you have two of something and one gets lost or broken or breaks, at least you still have one of that device or that item or whatever it is, right? But if you only have
yeah,
one of something and it gets lost or broken or damaged or used up or whatever, now you've got nothing. And so you've taken it a step further with the one is none, two is some, and three is done, right? That's what you said? So
yeah,
I
that's
like
it.
that.
One is none, two is some, and three is done. If you only have two, that's fine. But the more you have, the better it is. And then you need to update it. A lot of we tell people, go through your house and videotape everything in your house. Take a camera and
Mhm.
videotape everything you have in your house. You have a TV, you have jewelry, you have appliances, you have all that stuff. Because I'll tell you right now, I work with the American Red Cross since 9/11, and I'll tell you right now, my decades experience in disaster, insurance companies don't take your word for it. If you say you have a Rembrandt hanging in your, in your foyer, and it doesn't, and then the fire comes and everything is burnt and destroyed, they're not gonna give you that. But if you have proof that you had these things, you videotape it, and you need to update that all the time. So videotape it, and then every few months, every quarter, or every 6 months, videotape everything you have because things change. You buy new things, you get new things, and you need to have that updated so that you can walk up to the engineer and say, "Here's my video evidence of what I have. This is what I had. You need to pay me. I have this new, Rolex watch that cost me $20,000. If they're not gonna, if a video of you having it, they can't deny it. But if you don't have video evidence, they're not gonna deny. They're gonna say, oh, you don't have a, so
Right.
you have to have that, and your receipts, of course, and stuff
And
like
it's
that to back it up.
and it's so easy to do today with our phones, right? I mean, we
Absolutely.
can shoot video right around your office, your home, bedroom, like you said, any valuables, electronics, technology, TVs, jewelry. It's simple to do, but yeah, keep it updated because yeah, you may not have the receipts for everything, but as long as you have some sort of video evidence that it was in the home prior to it being whatever burgle, somebody stole it or if it was destroyed, at least you have something that you can fight back with. So very very good points there. I appreciate that. Um, can you so you work with different companies as you said you've been doing this for a long time. So where could you maybe give us an example of where having that sort of preparedness really made a difference with one of your clients?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that sparked me to start the Preparedness Network was this disaster that happened with a company that I worked with in Texas, and their communication systems failed, and because of a snowstorm, they had a big snowstorm, and all the phone systems and internet was down, and there was no way for parents to communicate with their kids or family or loved ones.
Mm.
Parents didn't know whether kids were okay at the school. So what do good parents do? What would you do if you were a severe snowstorm and you didn't know if your kids were okay and you had no way to communicate? You would get in your car and you drive to get your kids because you're a responsible parent.
Exactly.
Well, they did that, and they got about halfway there. They got onto a bridge. The snowstorm got so severe, and 4 people froze to death. 6 kids were orphaned, all because they didn't start a communication system. We went in and helped them set up a comm system that hooked into a satellite system for emergencies. We went into that company and we revolutionized how they did drills, how they responded to their communities, because when you don't respond, people notice it. But if you do respond correctly, people notice it even more, and it'll help build your brand and help your employees and help your customers. If you're a company, you need to have 3 things on your mind at all times: your employees, your customers, and the community that you live in, because those are your 3 responsibilities. And if you don't think
Absolutely.
that any one of those, if you don't think that your community is important to you, then they will notice that and you will go out of business. If you don't respond to your customers and your clients and support them in their time of need, then you will go out of business. If you don't respect and take care of your employees, they will leave and you'll go out of business. So if you want to be in business and all that, you need to have these 3 people in mind, and we help develop all these things. If you're in a company, all of a sudden a disaster happens and you are stuck in that company for 3 to 5 days. What would you do when you go to work, look around your office? Could you live there for 3 to 5 days? Do you have food there? Do you have change of clothing? Where are you going to take a shower? How are you going to, what are you going to do to keep your mind occupied? You're going to, I mean, yeah, if the internet's not, what are you going to do in that office for 3 to 5 days?
I
You
think
know,
most people would go stir crazy because they're not
but
prepared. Yeah, right.
yeah,
And we need to excuse me think about these things before, right? We've got to be proactive in this type of preparedness because being reactive, it's too late at that point, right? I mean, you're already in it when something happens, and so like you're saying, you go to work every day, you drive, keep something in your car. I always have blankets in my car when I'm driving. I always have jumper cables in there. I always have some uh, meal bars. There's certain things I have a backpack full of useful items that is in the car at all times. There's one in my wife's car. My kids each have one. As soon as they were old enough to drive, I put one together and put it in their car, and they kind of roll their eyes like, Dad, like, shut up, put it in your car, just
yeah.
forget
Well,
about it.
everyone should have 3 kits. Everyone should have 3 kits. I'm on the 3. I'm a 3 guy.
Yes,
Everyone should have 3 kits. You should
yeah,
have one if you're home, one in your every car, and one at work,
yes,
because you are going to be in one of those 3 places. You are either going to be at home, or you're going to be at work, or you're going to be in your car. Those are most of the 80% of the 80, 90% of the time. Unless you're on vacation in Cancun, you're going to be in one of those three places, you know?
And even when I'm on vacation, I bring a few things with me. It makes my
There
wife
you go.
nuts.
Yeah.
You know?
So, but yeah. So yeah. So that's what you need. I have three kits, one in your home, one in your car, and like you said, one for your kids and one for everybody, or have something in there. Make sure everyone is taken care of.
So, what I think what ends up happening a lot of times is when everything is status quo for a while, right? And so we get complacent. People don't maintain those kits. They don't update their inventories. They don't update their security protocols. They don't update, the items that are in their emergency, bug out bags. And so when something isn't happening for a while, or when there's something that's not, keeping this, in our mind every once in a while, it's easy to forget about it, right? And then that's a big problem. So would you recommend people maybe update things, oh, I don't know, quarterly, a couple times a year, something like that, so that, it's something that you just kind of bake into your culture and your routine? It's like every, January and every July, we update our, security protocols, or we review all of our plans, et cetera. I mean, would you recommend people do something like that?
Well, I would say it's different for families or for businesses. So for families, you can make a real game out of it, and you can give people the response, and do it, to a minimum of twice a year. I would do it every couple of months for families, because things don't change hugely amount of them. You can do it every 3 months or whatever, but minimum twice a year. When the clocks change, change your plans. And what I do, for families, I say, hey, do drills, because when disaster happens, 80% of what we know goes out the window. So more muscle memory we have on these things, the better it is. For businesses, I would do it once a month, and I would set up a team. I would find team people within your company that can lead and put on these things and put on drills that happen every month, and rotate your team leaders for this. And you know what? I'll tell you this will actually benefit you in ways you can't even imagine. Because when you give people these kind of tasks to do, it gives your employees a sense of self-worth and accomplishment that they're doing these things. And when people gain that, they're less likely to do bad things at work. They're less likely to steal or say bad words or get in fights or do anything like that. It's less because they have that sense of camaraderie. And when you do this, it also builds your image within the community, so your brand gets better, and more better employees will want to work for your company. So you'll attract better employees, you'll retain your employees, and you'll build your brand. And that's the three. I'm the three guy. The three key things to his business success: employee retention, attracting the best employees to come work for your company, and building your brand.
And a lot of that is it all contributes to the corporate culture, right? If you've got a
Absolutely.
culture of safety, if you have a culture of preparedness, that's a really good thing, right? People want to know that they have the tools at their disposal that they need to overcome different situations. And it doesn't have to be an emergency situation, right? It could be any challenge that faces business. If you're a company that relies on certain, raw materials or certain utilities in order to operate, right? Whether it's electric or water or whatnot. There are different ways that you can plan for some of those contingencies, and it should really permeate the entire culture of the company, and it grows. And as you said, you're going to attract people that share those values, that have the same, sense of responsibility, that aren't afraid to, you know, when the going gets tough, they're not afraid to step up and make sure that things are followed through. And then the other key point is you said too is, you have to rotate these people, because what happens if the day that there's an issue, the person who was in charge is out sick that day, right? Or if you have employee turnover, right? It's going to happen regardless. And if, 3 weeks ago, the person that was in charge, left for, a different job, did you have somebody step right in? So you should always have like a primary and an alternate, I would say, at the very least, or your rule of three, right? Primary and two alternates. that would be able to step into those shoes to fulfill the responsibilities. And so, very, very
Yeah.
good points, Jeffrey.
And part of disaster preparedness, and one thing that we do is we do our corporate social responsibility program. And people say, well, creating a volunteer culture within a company is not anything to do with disasters. It does, because when you get out into the community and you gain a connection with the community, and your employees volunteer, which also helps builds employee retention and attract employees, it is that when you gain that connection with your community, you're able to see what the community is looking for, and you're able to give back, and you're able to promote your company within the volunteer sections you do. But you gain an understanding of your community, because you need to support your community when disasters happen. You need to make sure you're there for the community, because that is your lifeblood. That's your nervous system. And you need to make sure you're out there for that community, and that'll help you in your disaster preparedness plans, and when you're out there volunteering, giving back in the community.
Very true. And we all need to support each other, right? If there's some sort of major disaster that's affecting everybody, the more people that can come together and support each other, and if you've already, developed those relationships ahead of time, you're going to probably work better with those people. You're going to get along better instead of like, some total stranger, and all of a sudden you're stuck in a dire potentially situation with someone and you have no prior relationships with them. Everybody's on edge to begin with. People can snap real easy. Stress levels are through the roof, right? So you have all of these things that are working against you. But if you do have a strong sense of community and you have established partnerships in the community and you have had at least discussions with others in the community, other leaders in the community, even other businesses nearby you, like, hey, if we ever have an issue, what are you guys doing about it? This is what we're doing. Would you like to get together and sort of discuss our plans and see, maybe we can learn from you, maybe you can learn from us. How can we make this better for everybody in case something happens? And that
Yeah.
really is, appropriate for a place that maybe has, fires or floods or major snowstorms, things that are going to affect more than one business, one home, et cetera, in an area.
So I'll give you a real world example of that. There was a company out here in LA, and they volunteered in the community with Habitat for Humanity, and they helped build houses. And in that they developed a connection, and a personal connection with the city council members. And they also were developing they developed friendships with some neighboring companies that one that had some storage systems, and owned a storage facility. Well, when the disaster happened, they had the personal number of the city councilman, and they had a friendship with them. They called them up, and they were able to get resources to their company much faster, which saved lives. And their friend over at the storage company got them, because they were inundated with people looking to do storage facilities. They got a prime invitation. Hey, we'll give you first call, and you can come in and get them. And they gave them 3 months free. So
Wow.
this saved them money, got them in on priority, got everything done correctly. And I mean, it's just imperative that you do this, and that giving back is a very powerful thing, and it's really easy to set up.
And in that situation, right? I mean, you have somebody that helps them out. Don't you think that the people that benefited from the generosity of the owner of that storage facility are going to be passionate either customers or advocates for that guy's facility going forward, right? If somebody says, "Hey, I need a storage facility," they're going to go, "I got just the guy for you," right? So in the long run, it's going to absolutely benefit businesses as well, by doing the right thing, right? And that's not always easy to do, but having that community focus is so important. So I love that. Uh, let's switch gears a little bit here. So when obviously you have disasters that occur, emergencies that can happen. Why does that training of the leaders, why is it such a crucial component of that you have someone that steps up to be a leader? Is it so that just you don't have everybody that, I have my ideas and you have your ideas and they have their ideas and we all are or not on the same page? Is it to try to get everybody on the same page and sort of organize it? Maybe you could explain that a little bit.
Well, I'm going to say this: everything in business rises and falls with leadership.
Hmm.
Without leadership, there is no business. And without the ability to duplicate yourself, without the ability to create new leaders, your business is failing. If you're not duplicating yourself and creating new leaders within your company, your business is failing. Okay. And that is it. Leadership is sharing influence. That's what leadership is in its definition. If you want the simple definition of leadership, it's sharing influence. As a leader, when you develop programs like this, you bring out leaders within your company. You develop those leaders that can come up and expand your company and grow your company. Whether you're a small business or a franchise business or a big company, no matter how many employees you have, if you build it by building leaders within your company, you'll save money because you'll be able to promote from within. You'll be able to develop these people that will be able to become the future managers, the future department heads, the future presidents and CFOs and whatever letter diverse. But you'll be able to develop these leaders that will build your business. And if you don't do that, your business is failing. And that's the truth.
Sure.
So you need to develop that. And by developing programs like this, by drilling these things in, you are able to people come up and do it. And like I said, change things out. 1 month Tom is a leader, and Margaret is the division is the area captain, and Bill's communications and stuff like that. So you have all these people do these things, do different jobs, and you're able to build a team. You got to build an organizational structure. It's a 4-pillar system. You build organizational structures for this for building your disaster preparedness. You build organizational structure. How are you going to do this? Then you go out and you spot your leaders and your team members, and your team members will eventually be your leaders, and we'll put more team members in, and it'll just be a never-ending circle. So develop your teams and your leaders, and then third, practice, practice, practice. Build that drill memory, and then fourth, show appreciation. A lot of people forget to show appreciation. If you don't show appreciation, people are not going to be motivated to do it. They're going to say, "Oh, great, this is," because you're asking them to do something, and it's not necessarily, it's their main job. It's something extra you're doing. So you need to show appreciation to them. And when you do show appreciation, people will step up even more. And levels of appreciation don't require a lot of money. I'm not saying you could just by sending an email out or spotlighting someone on your social media thing, or having your team shoot a video of this person doing a drill and saying this person's great.
That's a good point, because
doing a potluck quarterly. You do drills, do a potluck, invite the whole families to come in and be part of it. But show appreciation is so important.
I agree 100%, because it doesn't, like you said, have to be monetary at all. It can just be recognizing the efforts that your people are putting forth. You recognize that, and you let them know that you recognize it. It's one thing for us to recognize it, but it's another to let them know that we know, right? And that's and then of course they'll most likely uh, work even harder the next time, because it's like, wow, my boss, he really recognized the fact that I was working hard at this, or I did a good job at this, right? So it helps you, as you mentioned, build leaders within your organization, and maybe help you spot people that you maybe didn't consider for a management position or something like that, until you saw how they acted during these sorts of drills, where they maybe really stepped up to the plate and they impressed you, and you went, wow, this person is a natural leader. They took the bull by the horns. They were able to figure out these issues and didn't make excuses, right? So I mean, those are all positive things that are going to be very beneficial for a business when you're looking at your people, and you get a chance to see them in a different light.
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned that you worked with the Red Cross. You've been working with them for a long time. Uh, Obviously, they've been in the business of dealing with disasters for a long time, and through working with them, what would you say you've taken from what you've learned from the Red Cross and then incorporated some of that into what it is that you do with the Preparedness Network?
Well, I mean, the Red Cross is, they are, they have fundamentals that they do, and there's do no harm, be agnostic, and and provide needed care. I've been everything from logistics supervisor to run first aid stations for the Red Cross, to public relations officer, government relations officer, running shelters. I ran shelters during the fires here in Pasadena. All the jobs that I've had, outreach, sound the alarm committee, I've learned how to build relationships and how to recognize, how to spot needs in disaster, and also, how to understand how to speak to people. And the Red Cross has lots of trainings. They are training mad people, and there's all kinds of trainings that we do all the time, and it's virtual trainings, in-person trainings, all these kind of trainings we do all the time, and they really have a grasp on how to train people and understand how to motivate people through training, and how to drill those things into people. They also are learning how to, develop relationships with communities. As a government relations officer and public relations officer, I learned how to speak to the press and to speak to officials when disasters happen, and what information to give and what information to withhold at the moment, and how to to protect privacy, and and stuff like that. So it's enabling how to handle that. When you're running a disaster, when you're running a shelter, and you have people coming in who are who want to sell something to the community or want to do this, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with with churches who want to come in and help people, opposed to privacy issues, stuff like that. So it's a never-ending balancing and training, and I've learned that, and also the friends I've developed over the decades and decades that I've been with the Red Cross, having developed those relationships really helped me build this business.
And I'm sure that there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of things that you would not have thought of without doing the work for the Red Cross, like how to speak with, like you said, the media versus the disaster officials, right? I mean, you're going to talk to them two different ways, and so um, that's a great point, because there are a lot of there's a lot of chaos in a disaster, and so having the training that educates you ahead of time on how to deal with some of that. Um, you're never going to learn how to deal with 100% of it, right? Because every disaster is unique. There's always things that get thrown in that a monkey wrench that screws things up. But knowing how to deal with the adversity, deal with the challenges, know what to do, who to talk to, what to say, and how to approach those challenges is something that training is going to help with, drills are going to help with, but nothing's going to take the place of the real world experience, right?
Absolutely. I'd say absolutely. I was thinking about it. And the one most important thing that I learned with the Red Cross is scene safety. We in the Red Cross, we learn not to run into a situation until you evaluate the situation, because you don't know what that could be. And you run into a situation, you could get harmed. And then if you were harmed, you can't help other people. There was an incident where a car crashed into a telephone pole and ran over a fire hydrant and was unconscious in the car. And people ran to help the person. The minute they ran and touched the water, they fell down dead.
Oh,
Dead. Because they didn't know that the water was electrified from the telephone pole.
oh my heavens.
And even 3 firefighters were injured and had to go to the hospital because of that electricity. If they had looked and saw, oh, there's an electrical pole the wires are touching the water, and electricity and wire don't mix, maybe they would have stopped, and those people would have died. Instantaneous death. It's
Wow. Scene
you just
safety
got to
is
make
huge.
sure that when you run into situations, you have scene safety and you take care of yourself first. The person on the other end, is the situation is not going to change if you take a few minutes to take to take stock of what the situation is and to
That's
and
one of
have
the
scene
rules,
safe.
with first aid training. That is one of the things that they teach you, right? Is that scene safety, is assessing the situation. Because if you get injured, you can't, as you said, you can't render aid to anyone else, and now you're just another victim or someone else that needs help, right? So you're it's making the situation worse, not better. So that's a great point, and one that people really need to take to heart. Is before you rush in, take a minute and assess what happened, what's going on. Are there any risks to my personal safety before I go and I try to assist other people? And that's a great point. I appreciate that. Um, Now, we talk a lot about technology on this show as well, and like the cybersecurity and different things like that. But technology has also changed the landscape of training for disaster preparedness, probably in the, like webinars and things like that. Can you maybe touch a little bit about on how you've seen technology affect, I would hope positively, in the disaster preparedness training arena?
Yeah, it's actually affected, helped us a lot. Before we had to go running all over the country doing all these mass trainings in person and stuff like that. Now, probably 80% of our training is done virtually. We have a training program. When people buy our disaster preparedness training or active shooter training or any of our leadership trainings or any of that, most of them are done 80% is done virtually, and only 20% is done, things like first aid, self-defense, drills, stuff like that are done in person. But most of the other trainings that we teach are all done virtually. And then we've helped develop tools through the digital aspects that have helped us develop ways so that people can develop their own trainings and stuff like that. And then in the infrastructure thing, backup, data backup, things is immensely changed, and the landscape has changed, and how cloud is becoming more and more powerful, and how you could back up your data to cloud, and how you can have mobile data, and things like LTO drives. And LTO stands for linear tape open, and it's a tape drive that is almost indestructible. Hard drive you can drop on the ground and it's dead. A tape you can hit it with a hammer, and it's still there because all it is a tape. So and so people need to realize that technology is advancing, and all these things, how you can really understand, and how you can how we can use mobile devices. When we say, when we do our active shooter training, one thing we say is develop an app that everybody can use to communicate. Because one of the things that happens in an active shooter is the phone systems are shut down and stuff like that, and comms are shut down. If you have an inter-office communication system, an app that's on everyone's phone, people can communicate with each other without having to deal with that. You can have different levels, and you can have somebody can take a picture of the perpetrator, suspect, and and send it to management, and then management can share it with law enforcement. So these things can be done. Or you can say, hey, I'm injured. Here's the person who's injured, and they can tell you how to deal with that injury. You can have first aid apps on your thing. They can tell you how to stop the bleed. They can tell you how to do CPR, which everybody should understand anyways. Everybody should go CPR training. Hands only CPR and stop the bleed and bloodborne pathogens are three trainings everybody in the company should, and in your home should understand. But they have apps that can develop this, and there's ways of communicating that. So yeah, technology has really advanced in how we can communicate. Like that thing in Texas, you have a satellite phone with Starlink or with other systems that will enable you to communicate, because there's no storm in space. you know,
Right.
so finding better ways to communicate, better ways to get support, get help, and give help and get help can be all done with that.
So, so that's the high tech, right? How about when the high tech doesn't work, right? I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if you have a ham radio operator's license.
Yeah.
Do
I
you?
do. Everybody should get a ham radio out because when cell phones die, ham radio is how you can communicate, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
ham radio. It's been
So
on my list for a while. As I want to get my ham radio license. I have a ham
they're
radio.
cheap.
I have,
Yeah,
and funny enough,
you
we're
can
talking
get
about
free
apps.
training.
There's an
Yeah,
app on the phone that you can practice the test with, right? To
yeah.
learn how
It's
to
pretty
operate a
much
ham radio.
free training nowadays. Maybe sometimes it's $75. It's not that expensive. Get your ham radio license. That's very important. Yeah, low tech is good too. If the high tech doesn't work, low tech works too. One of the best things you can do to stop an active shooter coming in your room is to put a door stop in the door, or to get some zip ties and tie the door shut. Most of these suspects who are going through are going through quickly. They'll shake a door. If they can't open it, they're not going to spend 15 minutes doing a door. Most active shooter incidents are only about 20 minutes long. So, they're not going to, do that. So they're going to move on to the next thing.
Right. You want to do
But
everything you can to
yeah,
prevent their access.
right. And having backup water at your low tech thing. Just having things at your office or at your home, and low tech stuff that can keep people's minds occupied, keep people fed, keep people with water. You know, you can't exist very long without water. So we need to have that, and you can't rely on the water system. You have to have, so we have to have these things, and being able to understand the needs of the people and be able to respond to them, both, like you said, high tech and low tech, is very important.
So, companies, I think a lot of them that are listening maybe some of them do have plans, others may not have plans. But for those companies that are maybe on the fence or don't see the value of this sort of training, or maybe view it more as a burden and an expense that they're not going to see a return on, what would you say to those companies in terms of having them maybe change their mind, or, transition from viewing it as, something that they don't need or that's a pain or a burden to do versus something that's really critical and essential to have?
Well, you have business insurance, right? Businesses have business insurance. Businesses, have fire extinguishers. These aren't things that necessarily add to your bottom line, but they're things you put in your company. And a lot of this stuff is mandated. OSHA mandates everyone to have an active shooter training program where you can be fined by OSHA. And you can think of it in liability issues. You have insurance because if you have an accident, if an accident happens and you don't have insurance, you're going to have to come out of pocket of that. If you have an incident and something happens in your company and a disaster happens, earthquake happens and the company comes, then people get hurt. Well, if you did not proactively develop a plan, then your liability for that goes super high. If I'm an attorney, I'm like, oh, gee, this company did not properly plan to support its employees and its customers, then I'm going to sue him for 10 times what I was normally going to sue him for.
Yeah, because that's
So
negligence, right?
it's negligence, absolutely. So your liability goes super high. And, like I said, when I started this thing, you need to develop programs that retain your best employees, attract the best employees, and build your brand. Those are the three most important things a company can do. And nothing does that like developing these drills, because people come together, whether it's a volunteer drills or active shooter drills or disaster drills for whatever disaster is in your community. Look at what happened. It helps you build that by you reaching out to your employees and helping them develop these things, but so they feel more confident. They're more apt to stay with your company, and employees are gonna flock to want to work with you because they're gonna feel safe there, and your community is gonna love you because you're reaching out to the community and saying, "I'm here for you."
So there are quite a few unexpected benefits that
Absolutely.
companies discover once they do this sort of training, which is awesome because, that's, it's adding more than they expected in ways that they never really could have, I guess, anticipated. And so that's awesome. I mean, we all want to have things, turn out better than we expect, right? So
Yes.
I'm gonna talk about the website. I'm gonna pull this up here um, on the screen for those that are watching this on the YouTube channel. You'll be able to see that. Um, but and if not, you can go to preparednesstv.info. Tell us a little bit about the website, Jeff, and how
Yeah. So if
what
you click on
resources are here.
services, if you click on services, you'll see it gives you a lot of the services that we do here. So we do situational awareness. How can you learn how to be aware of things in your company, in your community that can be potential, hazards, and then active shooter educations, more and more, last year we had 786 active shooter instances in the United States.
Wow.
They're becoming so prevalent, and gun violence is just exploding. And so you need to have active shooter. You need to have, and our active shooter has a 3 phase. Most people just do the run, hide, fight. What happens when incident happens? Well, we do differently. We do 3 phases. The first phase is, what can you do to prevent an active shooter? How can you spot issues? How can you develop leadership programs, community engagement programs that will make your employees less likely to want to do harm? So what do you do before an incident happens? And then we do what happens when an incident happens. And our is different than most people. Most people do what's called the run, hide, fight program, which is what the FBI and law enforcement developed. But we do run, hide, defend. And you may think that what's the word, it's the same thing, but it's a mindset difference. And then the third thing is we do what happens after an incident happens. So you have an active shooter instance. Are you going to hold up your hands and let the government figure it out? Well, I'm going to tell you a secret right now. This is a secret just between you and me. The government does not always have your best interest at heart. Okay. So,
Very true.
and so you need to take charge, because the government is going to, the mayor, the governor, the whatever, he's going to care about what his political agenda is, what he thinks his constituents want. He's not going to give a hoots about your company. And if he can trash your company and promote his agenda, he's going to do that. So you need to develop a government liaison who can talk to the government, knows how to talk to elected officials and protect your company. And then and then sometimes worse than the elected officials is the media.
Yeah.
Because the media only cares about the media, whether it's Fox or MSNBC, they care about what they care. They're both the same in that they only care about their agendas. So you need to care about your agenda, and your agenda is you're protecting your employees, your customers, and the community you work in, protecting your company image. You need to develop a media relations officer, and then you need to be there making any notifications to families, so you can be there. So it's not just a government official who doesn't care about your company, but you need to be there so you can care for your employees and your people and your company and your customers. So that's our active shooter training. And then we go to our disaster triage. When a big disaster happens, triage is a French word, means to separate. And so how do you separate people from who don't need immediate help, people who need immediate help, to people who are deceased and don't need any help? How do you separate that? How do you develop plans and drills for that? And then we have our mastermind program, leadership things. We have our leadership goal program. We have several different masterminds through our John Maxwell certification that we do. And we do leadership goal, the 5 levels of leadership, all these different leadership programs we do, but that's one of our premier programs. And then I am a speaker. I come out and speak at events. I'm a certified speaker. I just came back from India, where I spoke in front of 700,000 people on
Wow.
disaster mindset and how to build a corporate culture of volunteer program. Building a volunteer program within your company will help retain employees, attract employees, and build your brand. Community awareness programs. Also that's giving back to the community. How do you reach out to the community and tell the community that you really care about them and you support them? These are programs we help do that. EMR and first aid training. EMR stands for emergency responder. There's also EMT training and first aid training. First aid is basic, what we call YFAS, which is basically just understanding how to do hands-on CPR, stop the bleed, and watching a 1 hour video called Bloodborne Pathogens that teaches you about how blood is transferred and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's EMR, and then EMR is a level above that where you get into much more involved, stuff like that. So we have EMR and first aid classes, and then a disaster assessment. So if you're a company and a disaster happens, how do you assess the disaster correctly so you can identify if your structure is too dangerous to be in, if it's okay to be in? How do you manage your data so you can back up your data and get your company? If your building is cracked and you have to evacuate, how do you relocate so that you can be up and running in business? Do you have backup mobile computers that you can grab a box that has 5 laptops or some whatever, and in your drive is back, and you're backing up the cloud, and then you're moving to a new location, you pop up and you're back in business. So you're there for your customers, because your customers' needs don't stop just because the disasters happen.
That's a good point. Very good point. So you do all kinds
of
training here. Very cool.
So these are all programs that we do. And then we have custom programs. But these are our main programs that we work with.
Awesome. Appreciate that. So businesses that are looking for ways of improving their safety preparedness and from the standpoint of looking at different things. Again, it's not something that we like to talk about, right? It's not something that we necessarily want to focus on, but it's unfortunately something that can become a reality. And and I've said this many times, but anybody that's ever been part of a disaster or involved in a disaster pretty much says the same exact thing, right? They all say, I never thought it was going to happen to me, or I never thought it was going to happen here, or I never thought this would happen, period, right? And so people like you, people like me, we're here to tell people, no, these things can happen. They will happen. And, you better have some training and some advanced planning in order to know what to do when, something unthinkable occurs, whether it's an active shooter, whether it's some other sort of, natural disaster. Lots of things can happen, workplace violence. So there are all different types of things that can, throw our whole day off and our week off and maybe our month off, depending on on the size and the scale and the scope of what it is that we have to deal with. So it's very important, and I think companies that don't realize it. I think you gave a great analogy, and I say a similar thing is, that why do you have insurance? Well, you have insurance just in case, right? We don't want to pay for insurance. We don't like paying for insurance. It's a bill we pay, hoping we never have to use it, right? It's probably the only thing really out there that we do that, but doesn't mean we don't have it. Just like fire extinguishers or anything else, have the training, have the equipment, have the knowledge to be able to survive the unthinkable, really. Now, mental health is a big issue with preparedness training, right? Because a lot of times these high stress situations cause people that normally are, I guess you could say, even keel and not stressed out easily. But all of a sudden now you have a situation that is very high stress, something that they've never experienced before. So how do people, I guess, prepare or plan for those types of stresses when they've never really had something like that occur? That's got to be difficult, right?
Absolutely. Well, like I said, I spoke in India, and I also spoke in a couple other conferences on disaster mindset. And when a disaster happens, you can have the right mindset and survive the disaster, or you cannot. I was at a hurricane in Florida, and I saw this big hunky guy, tough guy, young guy, and he had lost his home. He had lost his girlfriend, his business lost, and he sat on the stoop of his house, of what was his house, put his hand on his head, and went down to apathy. And within 2 days, he had died of a heart attack.
Wow.
And in retrospect, there was a 86-year-old woman who lost her home. She lost her business. She lost two of her family members in Hurricane Katrina. And, her community was flooded out, everything, but she had the right mindset. She said, okay, what I'm going to do, what you can do is first develop things like a personal mantra, but it doesn't have to be some hokey thing. You can just a simple word like family, love, whatever it is, develop a mantra and just keep that in your mind and keep the thoughts of your families and loved ones in mind. And you keep these things in mind, and enables you to steady your mind and steady what you're doing. And then and then the next thing is, develop a plan to survive for 5 minutes, then 5 hours, then 5 days, then develop a recovery plan. Small steps. Don't do the whole big thing. Oh, I got to learn how to build my house back up. No. Step back and learn how to survive. What do you do the next 5 minutes to survive? Take things in small steps, and you're able to develop that mindset. That woman not only survived the disaster, but she was able to organize a water drive to get pallets of water to her community. And within 3 months, her house was rebuilt. She was back in business, working in this new house that the community had helped her build, because she helped reach out to the community. And she was welcoming a new grandchild into her family.
Yeah, mindset is absolutely critical. I talk about the warrior mindset, right? We have to have the warrior mindset so that we're never going to give up, right? If there's an obstacle in our way, we go over it, under it, around it, through it, but we can't stop. We can't just say, oh, something's tough. I can't do anything about it. Woe is me. I give up. No, you can't do that. You have got to have the mindset of a survivor, of a warrior, right? And it's
Absolutely.
hard because to have that mental tenacity is not something that comes natural to a lot of people, right? And when you have overwhelming odds and an overwhelming disaster situation where, like in that example you just gave, young man lost everything, couldn't get past that, and ended up it killed him, and that's the saddest thing. But then we see the mental toughness of a woman who's in her 80s who decided, look, I'm going to survive this. What do I need to do the next few minutes, few hours, few days? And that's exactly what we have to do. Is we got to break down this huge, almost insurmountable,
I think
challenge.
I lost you there for a second.
Uh, we have to.
I think I lost you there for a second.
Oh, no, I'm here.
Okay.
But yeah, we have to understand that there are challenges that are not insurmountable, but if we break the large challenges into smaller, bite-sized pieces and focus on the short term, then eventually one step leads to the next, leads to the next.
Yeah. Small steps are always better. Like, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, how do you get to Oz? You follow the yellow brick road one brick at a time,
Yes. Yeah. Don't let things get overwhelming, and they easily can be when a huge problem occurs. So really appreciate you being on, Jeffrey. We're coming to the end of the show already. An hour always flies by with the guests. So I always enjoy coming on and learning what it is that you do, and educating our listeners and viewers about different ways of improving their safety, whether it's personal safety or their business safety and their preparedness, and how to deal with disasters and different types of adversities that we faced.
I
So
just want to
basically,
say
I mean,
one thing. I want to put one thing out there.
sure.
So if people subscribe to your channel, I have a link that I sent you called the free active shooter training, and it's a 1 hour or 2 hour certified active shooter training. So as they subscribe to your channel, we will give them a free, and it can be done virtually or in person, free 1 hour active. It's a 1 to 2 hour certified active shooter training program.
Oh,
And they will
fantastic.
understand everything they need to know about active shooter training, what they need to do to prepare, how they can prepare, and what the next steps are. And that's completely free.
That's awesome. We really appreciate it. I'll make sure I have the links in the description of the video. So just so I kind of sum this all up for our audience, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically what the Preparedness Network does is help small to medium-sized businesses basically make the transformation from being unprepared for disasters and workplace emergencies like active shooters into organizations that have, you know, good safety protocols, employees that are prepared and empowered, and of course, the culture of of a company that can then survive and thrive through a crisis. Is that kind of what you guys do?
Yeah, we teach company. Yeah, we do our different trainings, whether it's leadership training, active shooter training, disaster training, or CSR training. We train companies how to survive and thrive any challenges. Almost. Yeah.
That's awesome. Any last thoughts for our audience before I let you go?
Yeah, just please check out our channel. Please subscribe to this show. And if you have any questions, you can reach us at 8818-624-4242, or you can email me at jeff@preparednesstv.info, or visit our website, preparednesstv.info.
Excellent. So I was just going to say that. That's the preparednesstv.info. If you're interested in learning more about Jeffery Weiss or the Preparedness Network, you can find them on social media. Links will be in the description. We'll be sure to post that for you. And any company that is not prepared, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your employees, and you owe it to your community to do so. And so we appreciate Jeffery being with us today, and another great episode of Safety Talk. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch, and let's make this world a safer place together. Until
Thank
next
you.
time, Jeffery, thank you so much, and we will see the rest of you soon. In the meantime, stay safe.